Okay, there we go. Okay, hi guys, hi travel writing schoolers. The latest edition of the very irregular podcast, and I'm joined by Nathan James Thomas, who I've been keen to get onto for a few weeks, and we finally found time to do it. Nathan, you're in Poland now, I think you said?
That's right. I'm in Poznan, so roughly halfway between Warsaw and Berlin, where it's just after 4 p.m. but already pitch black. So
Right. Well, it's getting that way here too. But Nathan is the creator and founder and managing editor of the Intrepid Times, a website. I don't think you do a print at the moment, do you? But a digital.
it's on the cards, but we're web digital at the moment.
Sure. So a digital editor, commissioning articles every week, every month, and there's a lot more to the Intrepid Times than just publishing travel stories, which is really interesting. But I thought Nathan would be a good one to chat to because he comes at this a little bit like I do and a few of us, which is from a commissioning editor's point of view as well as a writer's point of view. And I think that kind of offers some extra deep learnings about the whole travel writing oeuvre, if you like. But I'll turn it over to you, Nathan. Give us just a brief summary of your background, how you got into travel writing and now travel publishing, and what were the kind of the pivots in your journey that made big differences to your decision making and what you're doing now.
Well, thanks, James. Thanks so much for having me on. It's such a pleasure to be on here, and I've really enjoyed getting to know your podcast, your school program, and all of the other great work you're doing supporting travel writers, which is very compatible with what we're doing at Intrepid Times as well. So I had a bit of I think this is true of pretty much all people in the creative fields, but I had kind of an odd background. So when I was at high school and university, I had a blog, which had nothing to do with travel writing. It was just a communication skills, personal growth blog. Back in the .blogspot.com days, but it grew into a proper website, and it was very successful. We had 20,000 people on our email list. It made good money. I put myself through college in New Zealand on that, and ended up selling that, not for like Silicon Valley money, but for what felt like a lot when I was 21, enough to disappear for 2 years and just travel. So I spent better part of a year living in China, first in Chengdu and then Shanghai. And then at some point, inevitably, being young and not planning well, I ran out of money. And the question is, what do I like doing? What do I know how to do? I like writing. I know how to sell things online. And I love traveling. So I started trying to get writing jobs, and I got a job working as a copywriter / travel writer for a China travel company, quite a big one. They're still going today, doing blog posts, doing web pages for them. And that led to a bunch of other gigs in the travel writing space. I worked quite a lot for an Australian travel website, which has since been sold. I don't actually know if it's still going. I think it is, but under new management, called Thrifty Nomads. Really great budget travel writing company. And back in the day, this is over a decade ago, one article, here is your ultimate guide to travel in China, that would basically cover a week's digital nomad, mid-20s living expenses. It was a lot of fun. Eventually I got older. I started, starting a family, and living expenses became higher. So I moved more into the editing and management direction. I have a family background in book publishing. My grandfather was a publisher, my father was, so I've always had access to that world. Kind of grew up around books and the process of making books. So using that love of travel writing, that exposure to the world of publishing, and some knowledge of how to make a website, build an email list, of create a community online, all came together in Intrepid Times.
Wow. I'm going to go off script straight away because I'm fascinated by your blog that you were able to grow and to a size where it was sellable or acquirable. What was that blog about?
It was very niche. So I was 14 or so when I started it. It was niche but popular. So I was super, I'm not really now, or really not now to be honest, but it was into that NLP world. So NLP, now people read natural language processing, but this was somewhat dubious self-help method that was very trendy in the 70s, and I was just super enthralled with when I came across as a teenager, called neuro-linguistic programming. And you kind of thought that if I learned this way of talking or this way of thinking, you'll be able to solve all your problems and accomplish anything. And I was very taken with it as a youngster, and wrote screeds of passionate articles about it, read and devoured everything I could. And that formed a real community. But I kind of lost passion for that and wanted to do something else, and sold it to a bigger fish in the same pond.
Wow. Okay. Because I mean, I'm fascinated by the whole blogging thing, because I still feel, I mean, things are changing so much now, it's hard to tell, but blogging, and even travel blogging to some extent, is that's still where some money can be made. You know, if you have a good audience, you just get those eyeballs, and you get the affiliate links going out, and you get advertisers coming on board, and sponsorships and partnerships. It can be like still very lucrative, and a very exciting way of being that, you know, location independent professional, I suppose. But you've decided to kind of go a slightly different route. I mean, I suppose Intrepid Times is a blog to some extent, but it's a bit more mainstream, isn't it? And a bit more professional in some ways than a blog like you did when you were a teenager.
Yeah, I suppose the difference is what is the actual difference between what we call ourselves an online magazine and a blog, and I think it's mostly there are two key distinctions. One is that a blog tends to be one person's voice. It's not always the case, but it's normally very much associated with the identity of one or two main owners and main voices, whereas we published several hundred writers and publish new writers every week. And the other is a difference of intention. I mean, blogs are very conversational and chatty. The writing is very informal. High kind of literary standards of writing are not, there are exceptions, but it's not normally prized. What is prized is that immediacy, that relationship, that practicality. Whereas we have different aspirations. We think blogs are fantastic. There are millions out there. We support them. There are plenty I read and plenty other people read. We're trying to create a home for something different, writing that is a little bit more introspective, that tries to achieve something that is not necessarily solving a problem or answering a query, but exploring an idea a little bit more in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, and I've noticed, I think your tagline for the Intrepid Times is travel writing with heart. So maybe expound on that a little bit. What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
It's a great question. So one way of thinking about it is we provide a home for the stories that you as a writer had no choice but to write. So that experience that caught you off guard and completely changed your perception of a place or even your perception of yourself. And there isn't really a space for that. There are a few places, but in the travel writing world, fewer opportunities to have that kind of writing nurtured by editors, taken seriously and given a platform.
And is there's still a readership then, I suppose, for those kinds of stories, as opposed to the, let's not call them clickbaity, but the slightly more sensationalist, bright, glaring, flashing light kind of stories that you get on some mainstream websites even these days?
There is a readership for it. It's a very passionate and highly motivated readership, but it's very different than the blog readership, and it's not a mass audience. I mean, there is no one is going to be searching for any of our articles. You know, you don't get on Google and say, I want to read a story about someone who was walking home last night in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and almost got mugged, but ended up making a friend. Like, that doesn't, you're going to Google, like, is Guayaquil Ecuador
very long tail.
Yeah, it's very specific. So we're not really stories that you're searching for, but what we hope is that, and what people do is that next time you're on the subway or have 5 minutes to spare or on the loo, and instead of pulling up your news app and getting a hit of anxiety, because that's what these apps want us to feel, go on Intrepid Times and just lose yourself in an inspiring and interesting story and feel a bit more connected to the world.
So your model then is to kind of build a fairly loyal audience, I suppose, who return to you, come back to you once they found you, think, oh, this stuff is great, I'm going to go back to that, not just wait for it to come up in their social media feeds or other ways that you might get in front of people's eyes.
Exactly. So that's why we publish new stories every Wednesday and new episodes of our travel writing podcast every Friday. And so it's a habit. So you know that on Wednesday there's going to be a new story. When we're publishing the winners of a writing competition, as we are now, there's going to be a new one on Thursday. And our emailed audience, so people really form a community. It's a tight, very animated community. They get excited when a new piece is live. There's discussion, and we have a private WhatsApp group for our writers. And there's a lot of excitement about chatting through those pieces. So it's kind of like, stop what you're doing. There's a new story live, but it's not, oh, I'm Googling to find an answer to this problem or to find more information on this. That's not the water in which we swim.
It's a very nice, refreshing take on digital publishing these days. And like I said, you've published 200 writers. I'm getting this from your website, and you've covered nearly 120 countries. It might be more now. So that's quite a lot of content. What are the kinds of stories, or are there any stories in particular that have kind of stood out for you over the last? I mean, I think you've been going at least 6 or 7 years now, haven't you?
Yeah, over a decade. And we only recently, it was only this month actually, that we counted the countries. And that created some quite interesting chatter in the community, with people seeing gaps that they could fill, or arguing with me about why this country or that country is or is not listed. I just outsourced that also to Encyclopedia Britannica, so take it up with them. But in terms of the stories that stand out, there are, I mean, I always go back to our writing competition winners and finalists. There's always something quite magical about them. I mean, there was one that we just published recently. There's always a recency bias here, but it was about a woman whose father was a gaucho on the plains of Patagonia. And she has this vivid description of remembering as a little girl tracing with her finger the scars on his hands as he told her stories of this exotic, forgotten world. And she traveled back there to spend a while working on one of the estancias and living as he would have lived. And that's, I think, kind of has all the ingredients of the kind of story that we love. There's a very personal angle, and there is access to a place from a perspective and with a level of depth and connection that your average traveler wouldn't be able to get.
You're saying words that I love to use as well: access and personal connection. And I mean, that's what you described there. It's almost cinematic in tone, isn't it? You can almost see it on a big screen in front of you as this woman tries to retrace her steps. So all right, let me give you a rather tricky question now. But I know that you're into the craft of travel writing, as we discussed a little earlier. What makes a great travel story? Is it those things that you've just discussed, or are there kind of broader concepts that you're always looking for? What do you not look for in a travel story, if that makes the question any easier?
Yeah, I mean, so I have kind of a pet peeve, and this is something that is almost a family obsession. So a story I tell sometimes is I mentioned my grandfather, who was a publisher in the UK, and he had a habit that whenever a manuscript arrived on his desk and it was written in the first person, he'd take out a blue ballpoint pen. This is before the days of computers, and he would open it to a random page and circle every time the word I appears, as in the first person pronoun. If there are too many times, he'd chuck it out. And then, I get a lot of pushback, but Nathan, I'm writing about myself. Of course I need to say I. Yes, you do. But if it's every second word, it's a sign that your emphasis is probably not where it should be. I describe it to readers as if you used the word cinematic before, and it's as if you're turning the camera off the landscape and back to yourself. And sometimes that's appropriate. You're establishing a perspective, you're anchoring in the reader in the moment. They are relating to your feelings, and that allows them to connect with their feelings. Totally use it, but do so knowingly and deliberately. Otherwise, it's just scattered all over the place. And that's one of the things that really stands out in a lot of pitches we get that don't make it.
That's a really good point. And I think this is something that kind of newbie travel writers struggle with. It's getting away from that postcard home blog type entry where this is what I did, this is where I went, this is what I felt, and broadening it out to help the reader kind of, yes, that, like you say, that there's a place and a time for that sort of thing, because it does help with that engagement and that connection. But making the story more important to the reader often means stepping back, zooming out, and taking a broader view, doesn't it?
Big time. And the other thing related to that is, you used the word story, is really understanding when you are telling a story and when you aren't. I mean, a lot of new writers, I'm sure you've encountered this a lot, can mix up in their heads. They conflate stories with topics. And here is a story I wrote about the time that I lived in Colombia. But that's not actually a story. That's a subject matter, the time that you lived in Colombia. We want a specific experience. What happened on Tuesday? And we want the story to feel satisfying with a beginning and middle and an end. And ideally, the end is different from the beginning because of what happens in the middle. And there is that, it's the oldest writing trick in the book, where the ending calls back to the beginning, but it's satisfying because you read that same sentence or that same observation, that same touchstone again, but you relate to it completely differently. And it reminds you how far you've traveled in 1,500 words or 2,000 words. And that's really satisfying. And we want stories that achieve that sense of journey or change.
This kind of conversation reminds me of a Christopher Nolan movie, Interstellar. You may have seen it. And he loves to kind of layer his movies, and we're talking about movies here, but I think stories and travel writing can do similar things, because when I first watched that movie, I wasn't a father, and for me it was just a sci-fi movie. It was a thriller and a sci-fi thing about time travel and time dilation and all this sort of thing. I watched it again about 7 years later, after which I'd become a father to a young daughter, and all of a sudden it switched to a love story between a dad and his mother kind of thing, or a dad and his daughter, and the sci-fi was almost irrelevant. So I think there's a lesson there as well in understanding that the reader doesn't always come from the same perspective as yourself, and for that reason getting away from the I and all that sort of stuff is an important skill to acquire, let's say, as well. But you mentioned kind of courses and workshops and stuff that you do at Intrepid Times there. Maybe go into some of the details. How did all that start, and what's the kind of the schedule of the diary looking like at the moment? And maybe can you touch on, good craft versus bad craft, in terms of what people will learn out of these courses or workshops?
Absolutely. I mean, the workshops arose almost out of sheer rage, to steal Jeff Dyer's line, because we're getting so many pitches or stories in our inbox that were so close. Like, the writer clearly had an amazing experience. He clearly has something to say, but the craft is all over the place. They just don't know the fundamental things that you need to know in order to deliver a professional level travel story. And I just wanted to be like, right, we want to fix this for you, but we don't have the time to, we get several hundred stories a week sometimes in our inbox, and it's just not viable, even if we had multiple people doing this full time, to take every single one by the hand and walk them through it. So it's like, right, we want to help you. You clearly have something important to say here. We want to help you say it in a way that editors like us, but not just us, will respond to, in a way that the value and the importance of what you're saying is not buried under this sea of eyes, or the fact that you're bringing a unique perspective that becomes an asset and not a liability when you're framing this experience in a way that its value to others is more apparent. So we started doing one-off workshops, some taught by myself and other members of the editorial team, some in partnership with other established travel writers. We've worked with Tim Leffel, who's very well known in the travel blog world, David Farley, the New York Times writer, Mary Novakovic, who's very established on the British travel writing circuit, as well as a few others. And then just now, actually, we wanted to apply a little bit more structure, because we have all this experience as to what do writers, when you're working with them, what are the questions that come up a lot? What are the things that they struggle with? What are the aha moments that actually help them go from struggling to delivering pitches to getting published? And we've seen writers we've worked with go on to get published in BBC, Atlas Obscura, elsewhere. What worked? And we created this into a structure to our Craft of Travel Writing certificate course. We run live cohorts, so we're in the middle of the first ever cohort right now. We have a new one starting in January. And it's important for us that it's live, so we have that personal connection with the writers that we come up with, and we will hang out in a WhatsApp group, past, present students and people who've come to our workshops and writers that we've published. So supportive, and it's a lot of fun as well.
Great. And so you open these on, so you can't join now, is that what you're saying? You have to wait until the next cohort opens?
Yeah, so you can join now for the January one that's coming in the future. So we're speaking now in November, but you can't join for the one that began 2 or 3 weeks ago. The workshops take place weekly. Not everyone actually joins them live. I would say actually only around 50% of students come live for the workshops. The others catch up on the recording. But the fact that we're all moving together in a cohort and we will get feedback at the same time, then we will get qualified, because we have this certificate we issue at the end, and we want that to mean something. So we have to receive a quality travel story from each participant at the end and spend time reviewing it and giving feedback on it before we issue that document. And that's why we want to have the cohort model. Also, we found that writers really procrastinate. So if we don't put deadlines, they won't take any action.
Right, yeah. Okay, so Intrepid Times then, I mean, like you said, you get pitches every day, every week. how do you invite pitches? Are you just open all the time? Are you accepting pitches now?
Yeah, we're open all the time for our standard travel writing pitches, and that's just a 1,500-ish word travel story, following some of the things that we said, but with no real restrictions on subject matter. There are a couple of things that help your case. One is if they fit into an existing series that we have. Our most popular series is probably They Told Me Not to Go To, and that attracts some really cool stories about edgier parts of the world. We just published one this week or last week on Iraqi Kurdistan. They told me not to go to Iraqi Kurdistan. The other is that, as you pointed out, we've published stories on about 120 countries, and we have this informal mission that we want to publish a good travel story on every country in the world. And we have a list on our website of those that we've covered. Many have been covered with dozens of stories, some just one or two, and those that are blank. And we kind of prioritize those that are blank so we can edge towards that goal. And the other thing is we run quite frequent writing competitions. Those are really fun. They've become really popular. We have one open right now. It's in partnership with Travel Lemming, who is an online travel guide company. So they are guides, we have stories, and it's called A Human Moment, and it celebrates human written and human orientated storytelling in this crazy AI world that we're all in. They're also, we have a no AI policy at Intrepid Times. Travel Lemming have the same, so there was a values alignment there.
Yeah, and I saw the last competition you did was a book took me there, I think, wasn't it? Which I love the idea of. I mean, it's kind of a popular theme, I guess, travel writing off the back of reading a book about somewhere, but they just seem to go hand in hand so well. Good books that are on a different part of the country and reading somebody else's thoughts and experiencing yourself. I mean, that must have come up with some good story submissions as well, I imagine.
Amazing submissions. It's always hard choosing the winners. There's always furious debate in our editorial rooms about it, but this was the hardest because normally, like, just to make numbers simple, if we have 500 entries for a competition, 400 of which will be obviously not viable commercial material for reasons that we've outlined, and 100 will be good, and then it's those 100 that we really have to wrestle with. In this case, maybe far more than half were actually decent, solid stories that could have a chance to be published. I think part of the theme attracts people who are readers, because you have to have read a book, and readers make the best writers. And it's so obvious, you must know this as an editor too, whether someone is actually a reader of your publication and is submitting a story because they're familiar with you and your voice and they want to be a part of that, or they're just spraying and praying and they don't really have a connection with you.
So you said something that sparked something and I've forgotten it now. Never mind. Okay, so I'm sorry, I was going to ask. Yes, so these competition submissions, they have to be unpublished. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we don't publish stuff that's already been published elsewhere. We don't mind if people go on to republish stuff on their personal blog after we've published it, but we don't want to be republishing stuff that's already out there on the internet.
Okay, sure, got it. Okay, and so for those, what do you pay, by the way? And is a regular commission paid differently to a competition-winning submission?
Yep. So what we pay is in flux. We're planning to change this soon. We have changed it before. So a competition winner gets $300. A regular submission gets $100. And it's a debate we're having right now in the editorial room at Intrepid Times, because people who listen to your podcast and who are part of this world are probably sick of editors grumbling about how hard it is to find a penny to rub together in this industry. But of course, an independent travel publication has to be very, very budget conscious. And the question is, like, say hypothetically, just to use really simple numbers, if we had $1,000 a month to give to writers, and this $1,000, the only purpose of it is to be paid for travel writing, what do we do with that? We could publish 10 stories at $100 a pop, 100 stories at $10 a pop, one story at $1,000, 2 stories at $500. It's really a wrestling match as to what will create the best outcome to foster the best writing. And there's the best writing for writers and the best writing for readers, like the best condition for writing for writers and the best resulting writers for readers.
That's it's a really interesting dilemma or problem to try to solve, isn't it? Do you know in which direction you're most likely to head on that yet, or is that kind of still being discussed?
Being discussed. I mean, we're kind of taking the middle ground at the moment. I mean, thing is, we've never, even though I wish we would pay more, and occasionally people say, "Oh, $100 is far too little for a great travel story." Like, I agree. I wish we'd pay much more, but if we did pay much more, we would have to publish much less. And we've never, even when we were much smaller, we've never had an issue with, "Oh, I don't think we have a good quality story to hit our weekly publication." That's never been a problem. So the question is, like, as our reach grows, we do more sponsorship deals, our budget increases, do we increase the pace, or do we maintain the pace and increase the pay? It's a really, like, it's not a simple answer. It's an ongoing debate. I mean, hopefully we'll be able to do both. That would be ideal.
Do you worry about other publications that pay more losing writers to them? Is that a concern, or is that, it sounds like it's not much of a concern then at the moment?
No, the publications that pay more don't pay more for the kind of stuff that we publish. They pay more for stuff that is very engineered to be commercial, that they're going to stuff with affiliate links to booking.com and Airbnb and Get Your Guide, and that is designed to appeal to a search engine trend that is service journalism. They don't pay more to learn about that random thing that happened to you 2 years ago that you can't stop thinking about and contains really important lesson about travel and life. I don't think there's anyone paying more for that. I mean, if they are, fantastic, but they're probably even more inundated with submissions than we are.
So, like I said at the top of this, one of the things that you and I have both done is we've both been freelance writers, but we've both been commissioning editors. And I often feel like being an editor can really help with being a writer in terms of knowing what editors want and what they're looking for. So do you agree with that? And what things do you do differently as a writer now that you've also been a commissioning editor?
Yeah, great question. I agree with that with half of the brain, and half disagree with that from the other half of the brain. Like, yes, I think it means you will inevitably think logically, strategically, commercially about writing, and you'll understand what is the audience for this, what is the packaging of this. But it also means that it can be hard to turn off that editor voice and just, I don't know, do you struggle with this, to turn off that editor voice and just rip into unfiltered creative mode?
I don't, but I think I've just found what I feel is a nice natural balance. So, and don't forget, I think you're under different pressures than I'm under, running your own kind of independent blog. You've probably got all sorts of things in your head about how to make this viable and long-term and sustainable, whereas I don't have those similar thoughts going on in my head right now anyway.
No, that's understandable. But yeah, I do think that it helps more than it hinders, because I know what an editor's inbox looks like, and I know what's nice to see there and what isn't nice to see. And it really just comes back to, more than anything else, target. Know who you're writing to.
And do you do much writing yourself these days, or are you quite busy with reading other people's writing and deciding what goes up on your site?
I do quite a lot. I've been focusing on books. So I had my most recent book published 2023, and that was I was a digital nomad for many, many years before my daughter was born, and now very much not, although kind of still am, I guess, but much less than before. And the book Untethered was about that subject matter. And I've been wrestling with a book on Poland for a long time, and I also kind of have another project to put my energy in when I'm procrastinating on that project. I still do articles and pieces, some for Intrepid Times, but they have to be approved by a different editor, not me, and sometimes they're not, which is cool. And some for elsewhere. Did a couple of really fun pieces for Lonely Planet not long ago, in Poland, which was great, and one about Albania as well. But my primary day job now is not actively getting travel writing commissions. I'm primarily a publisher and platform builder, which is in the same room but on a different side of it.
Sure. And you mentioned your book there. I was going to ask you about this because, yes, it's called Untethered, Living the Digital Nomad Life. And it's, from what I haven't read the book, but from what I have seen of it, it's a practical guide basically to living a life of freedom and this location independent life. So are there any kind of nuggets from there that you could share with us about, because I think that's what appeals to a lot of travel writers as well, especially if they're not kind of, anchored down to the floor with family ties and that sort of thing yet. So what kind of nuggets are there in your book that might be useful for people looking to do something similar?
Yeah, there's a whole range of things that, because I used to get, because I was sort of known in circles that I traveled in as someone who was doing this digital nomad thing, cropping up in various places. And it didn't used to be called that. It was just, oh, he lives in various places. But then they got that label sort of applied to it. And the digital nomad image sort of conjures up kind of a programmer or Bitcoin bro or something like that. And I wanted to rescue it from that and write more to creatives or freelancers, people actually doing useful type work, and how to liberate yourself from location dependence, ride that wave of remote work possibility that COVID enabled, and have fun whilst doing it and deal with the practical things like visas, tax residency, not going insane. One of the things I really struggled with was this phrase working from anywhere can mean that you end up working from everywhere. How to deal with that. That was a real challenge for me. Still is in some ways.
You mean switching off, learning to kind of bookend the days and make sure there's your own time in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always shocked when friends who have normal office jobs, they go away on vacation and don't take their laptop. What do you mean? Like, then how do you get stuff done?
How do you breathe?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, nice. I mean, it sounds like a really good project, but you're going to be exploring something slightly different then for your next book. It sounds like that's more of a travel log or travel destination type book.
Yeah. So Poland, I've known intimately for about 15 years, and it's been my primary home for about 3 years. And it's where my daughter was born, and it's where my wife is from. And I feel like the perception of Poland outside of Poland is about 20 years out of date. Poland is still sort of seen as the stereotypical Eastern European backwater. People may know intellectually, like it's made headlines in the UK that Poland on track to overtake Britain economically, but what does it actually mean in practice when you travel there? And also Poland is just so fascinating now because it's kind of on the front line of many of the things that Europe and the West are dealing with, from Russian aggression to problems of the democratic process to a deeply divided country between rural and urban, between old and young, between religious and secular. So it's a super fascinating place. It's also a big and important country, and people are starting to realize, and Poland itself is also starting to realize, that it's a fairly big and quite important country, and it's just rising in prominence. So I'd like to try with the characters that I've met here, Poles and expats, and the conversations that I have and the access that I've acquired over the last decade and a half to try and string something together. And what I have really is kind of just a brain dump of about 25,000 words. I don't quite have the thread that snaps it all together yet. I have about 300 hypotheses for what it could be, but I'm still wrestling with it.
Well, that's a good take for travel stories of 1,000 words as well. You need that kind of central thread to bind it all together, don't you? So look, I'm going to have one more question, and we can't leave without talking about AI. You mentioned it earlier as having an anti-AI policy, and I did see on your website you were, I'm going to quote from it here, writing produced or processed through AI tastes of styrofoam. So I think we know roughly what your take on AI is, but do you see AI fitting into the travel writing space at all? And why do you have an anti-AI policy? Is that because you just think the quality is far superior when it's human written and AI can't add or even compete on that side?
I have an anti-AI policy for Intrepid Times because of the specific thing that we're trying to accomplish, which is very personal stories that go deep into that human experience of travel, that are meant to form a connection with other people. And it's kind of antithetical to that entire mission that it would be generated through a machine. And it's very obvious. I don't know if you find the same. It's very obvious in the editor's desk what has and has not been processed through AI. There's a uniformity, a suspicious sameness, a tautness. There's no voice. I think AI would be an amazing writer if only one person was using it, and this guy would be getting away with it. But when you're getting 20 pieces a day that all kind of feel, they all say, the train station in the dusk stood as a beacon, beckoning me through the neon. You just kind of, hang on, I saw that phrase before and before and before. And I know the counter argument to that is like, yeah, this is still new technology. What if it gets better? I mean, what if it does? It still won't be written by you, you the writer. It still won't be real to your own experience. It still won't have actually been created by someone who actually was there. So who cares?
Yeah, well, you'll be pleased to know that ChatGPT actually went down today for a few hours. I think
I didn't notice. Proud that I didn't notice. That's great.
Cloudflare went down, and all the services that attached to Cloudflare kind of went down as well. And so, yeah, I made a comment somewhere that suddenly the world's production of M-dashes halved.
Yes, Sam Altman claims that he's hacked the system to remove M-dashes on requests. So
really,
this is going to change everything.
Brilliant. Nathan, thanks so much for your chat today. That's really insightful, I think, particularly with some of the, I mean, I love what you're doing at Intrepid Times. I think your focus there on, these very human stories, it sounds like, and stories with heart, I think is a nice way of summarizing them. Sounds like that's the sort of thing that we're losing, isn't it, in kind of this very commercialistic, mercenary digital world where we're going after clicks and eyeballs and attention and all that sort of thing. So thanks for your time today. We'll put some links and more info about your courses and workshops and the next travel writing competition that's coming up soon, I'm sure. But thanks so much. It's been really insightful.
Thanks, James. Real pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Take care, Nathan. Bye-bye.